The same applies for, this is at one street, and say we did the second version with the red concrete. If we did that in this one place, that then helps justify it in another local suburb. And so there is an argument to that, but it is that incrementalism approach. And I think being bold from the start, and actually I think looking at the two images, the one where there's the more simple design and this one here, it's obviously the same street, it actually does highlight that to do things properly is going to make a much bigger difference. And, of course, we can start with the tactical urbanism stuff, but let's be bold in what we ask for.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Matthew Tepi Mclaughlin out of Perth, Australia. And we're going to be talking about a recent article that he wrote with a past guest here on the podcast, Grant Innes. But before we do that, I just want to say, hey, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Hey, super easy to do. Just click on the join button right here on YouTube, or navigate over to activetowns.org. Click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options. Okay, let's get right to it with Tepi. Matthew, Tepi, welcome to the Active Towns podcast.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love giving my guests just an opportunity to introduce themselves. So who the heck is Tepi, and where are you?
I'm in Perth in Western Australia, the longest city in the world. Not a title that we're necessarily proud of, but a bit about me. I'm a self-described pracademic, so a job as an academic in the last few years, and I've now swapped to working both in academia, research, and also in government, but all around physical activity. So very aligned to your show, John, and Active Towns, but we're interested in that sort of movement and health and physical activity benefits.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you mentioned the longest city in the world. So yeah, we've got it pulled up here on screen, Perth in Western Australia. And by chance, how long is the longest city in the world?
I think we're touching 170 kilometers. So what's that in miles? Over 100 miles. Yeah. It's very, very long. We keep sprawling along the coast. We open up parcels of land, north and south. We just keep going. Urban infill seems to be a real challenge because of subsidies for those urban fringes. We had an interesting report here in Perth, $90,000 in subsidies for house building on the urban fringe. So we not get, yeah. So that's why they're getting built that way. The housing industry is taking advantage, and as that makes sense, of those subsidies. The road building, the school building, the sewerage, all of that's put in for free for them.
And I love what you call yourself, a pracademic. So this is so cool. You're doing practical things, but you have that academic background. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about how that manifests itself and what you do on a daily basis, and all of that. But yeah, going back to the longest city in the world and the sprawling, the thing that comes to mind immediately is the whole strong towns movement and Chuck Marone's perspective, and looking at how as we spread out and we expand horizontally, you're just not able to generate enough tax revenue to actually support the infrastructure, of that horizontal expansion. I mean, the roads, the pipes, and all of this, delivering services. Now, I know that there's some changes or some differences in probably the financial and tax stuff, one country to the next, but I think it's pretty solid evidence, I think, that there's probably no likelihood that you can tax people out on the fringes in the urban sprawl enough to actually be able to compensate the cost of delivering those services. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, because it becomes more expensive, right, to do that sprawl, and the taxpayer ends up paying. And we know that we can perhaps bring up the Australian government report and own the federal report that shows road subsidies. It shows $8 billion in road subsidies because they only collect 31. There it is, yeah, 31 billion in road related revenue. So that's from your registration of your car, your licensing, uh, your parking levies, your fuel tax, all of those things added together at all levels of government. Totals 31 billion. Then you look at what they spend on roads at all levels of government, because we have 3 tiers of government in Australia: local, state, and federal, and all spend on roads, and it's 39 billion. So that's $8 billion in road subsidies. That's not even taking into account the flow-on effects of that car dependency, that air pollution, that road deaths, the cost to fund the hospitals, to deal with the enormous amount of serious injuries that we have from our roads. So it's, yeah, even just the raw numbers themselves, it's massive subsidies. And I think, yeah, you're right. We can't, if we continue to sprawl like that, it's costing everybody more money, including non-drivers. So non-drivers
Exactly.
are paying for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Insidiously,
this is not what
probably
people
the
want.
worst. Yeah.
You know, people, we all want convenience. We all want easy ways to get around, and that makes sense. So for some journeys, it makes sense to drive. For some people, and society will always choose the most convenient option. But if we make the most convenient option the subsidized, car-dependent option, that's what people do, right? And people on this podcast know that more than others, but we all want to live in those active towns where people are connected, people feel like they've got their friends close by. It's actually something that I'm doing at the moment. I'm a new dad as of 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and writing a children's book for my daughter, and really focusing in on, the longest city in the world, and her friends could potentially be living 170 kilometers away. And that just being this silly idea that, people's commutes are now, upwards of an hour stuck in congested highways, that the wider they get, the more cars they get. And yeah, the solution isn't to go further and further out. The solution is to start to densify and to start to provide opportunities and convenience for people to get to things that they want. But to do that, we've got to cut those subsidies.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to get to subsidies and some of the other insidious things that play about. We'll talk a little bit about how we got connected in just a moment, but I want you to fill in the blanks a little bit more about your story. How did you get interested in this work, and even get interested in studying what you studied, and what did you study?
So like the pracademic thing is because, obviously academics get critiqued a lot for being in their ivory towers and just kind of publishing these papers and not really connecting with the real world. And that wasn't me at all. I got very frustrated with that early, and did a really interesting PhD, learned those foundational skills in research and how to conduct really valuable research for government. I actually did my PhD within government to inform government practice over on the other side of Australia in New South Wales. And so I learned those foundational skills, but I really wanted to be a pracademic, which meant not only doing the research, but trying to connect that research into the real world. And but the physical activity thing, John, yeah, I have always been interested in physical activity. That is sport and gyms and exercise to some extent. If you've got the time and the access to those things, that is fine. But the reality that hit me very early on is that most people don't have that time and access to those things. And if they do, they're kind of super sort of into it, and it's something that they sort of force themselves to do, and it doesn't feel natural and part of everyday routines. So I was kind of, well, how do we get this routine-based physical activity going? And obviously people have been thinking about this for a long time, and active transport, active travel, whatever people call it. And it's the majority of our physical activity, I should say, globally. 3 times as much physical activity from walking, riding, taking public transport, those types of things, than leisure physical activity like sport. So I was really interested. Whoa, we don't want to see that decline any further, because physical activity is so good for us, so good for our health, so good for the society, and keeping people out of hospitals. And the taxpayer loves physical activity because it means they pay less tax.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I really got into it from that side of things. Is it was a health-based route. I went to study at Loughborough University in the UK, which is the number one in the world for sport and exercise science. Again, got a really good grounding there. So yeah, that's where I'm at today.
Well, yeah, very similar to my background, with my background in exercise science, and then layering in healthcare cost containment strategies and disease prevention and health promotion programs and all that. And yeah, as promised, let's kind of close the loop in terms of how we got connected. And it's all because of this guy up here in the upper left corner here, Mr. Grant Ennis. He was like, hey, John, you need to, connect with this guy. And this, of course, is his episode from a couple years ago, where we, really dove deep into the dark PR concept. And the title of his book is Dark PR, and, really taking a look at the corporate influences, not just in the United States, which is particularly insidious, but really globally around the world, and how the corporate interests and the other interests that really shape the narrative and shape the message, and thus employing dark PR. And really, he, in the book, he takes a look at 3 different really buckets. He takes a look at the climate issue, takes a look at traffic safety, and takes a look at sugar and diet. And just a fascinating book. Now, how did you get connected with Grant?
Well, I've got to say, I am a self-professed lover of the Dark PR book. I would highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in this. It's super. But Grant gets to it. He gets to the point. We cannot do this without challenging the politics of this. So the thing that stuck with me most from what Grant says is we can't just keep asking for more stuff, like more bike lanes or more trees or more density, without actually tackling why those things are the way they are, and what are those subsidies, what are those industry influences, what is that dark PR that sits behind things. And our health promotion training, John, would tell us that we've got to look at those determinants. We look at industries like tobacco and industries like the junk food industry, and it's quite obvious with those industries. But I think there's less work being unpacked in the physical activity world to date, and made clear that, yes, we absolutely have to unpack the sort of commercial aspects and the subsidies that undermine physical activity actions. Because I'd come from this world, and we might bring up a few of these documents that I've worked on across the years that I've been lucky to be involved with, really, but are international policy documents. So one's the 8 investments that work for physical activity. This is a global document. But what I really learned from reading Grant's work and reading others' work is that although we've said that there's 8 investments there, and it's a really good starting base, that we've got buckets of ways that we can invest and take action to increase physical activity. So they're things like active urban design, active transport, active schools, active workplaces, and obviously there's 8 of them. But what we need to do is start to prioritize the most effective ones. because we can't keep asking for everything at the same time, because it's turning people off. The decision makers want to know what to implement that's effective, supported by community, and has that, I suppose, political side to it as well, as to what's feasible to implement. But it's only feasible to implement when people get organized and start demanding that change. And I suppose that's another element of Grant's book, which is fantastic, which he kind of finishes with, which is, in order to combat this dark PR, we have to get organized and start to take action together, not just from an active towns perspective or a physical activity, health perspective. We actually have to come together with other groups that are in aligned areas, whether it's climate action or loneliness, suicide, mental health, and come together and say, we're all interested in this. We know that our populations are actually really, really want to live in places that support good health, that support climate, that does all of these things. Yet we have all of these subsidies and things going on over here that we need to start to tackle.
Yeah. And you mentioned, it's very much a part of, of the book. And in fact, it's number 8 and number 9 combined of, the knotted web. Hey, everything is complex. There's no clear solution. Therefore, we have to do it all. And if you're doing it all, you're not doing anything. And then the multifactorial thing of the devious frames that don't work, unless you combine them all. It's like, yeah, oh, no, you can't just do one thing. You got to do them everything. And what happens with these, because there is a grain of truth in all of that, is that it just gets us to the point where, because everything gets so diluted, nothing really gets done. And the whole point of his book, of course, is that if we want to address this, we have to get to the root cause, as far up the chain as possible in terms of the legislation that is in place, which allows these devious frames to take a hold and shape our narrative. And we're going to talk a little bit about your recent paper that you wrote with Grant. And in fact, why don't you set that up, and I'll pull it up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I perhaps just before we go on to that, I'd
Sure.
like to say one big thing for me. And look, I'm in my sort of middle career now, starting to transition into that stage. I've gone on this journey that over time and realized that, and so if there's people out there going, well, obviously, Tepi, there's multiple things we need to do, and you keep saying that we need to prioritize things. That sounds like, to me, you're saying, is there a silver bullet? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying, we need to prioritize. And just for example, we have, documents that have hundreds, not 10, not 20, hundreds of actions in them for a government to implement to increase physical activity. So it's just kind of, it's giving them a menu of options, sure, but also it's kind of a little bit like, well, which ones are actually effective of those that would change population physical activity? Because to me, if it's not going to change the walking and cycling rate, or it's not going to change the amount of people playing sport, or the access to whatever physical activity people want to do, walking or have access to, then why are we promoting it as a solution, as the priority? That'll be a flow-on benefit of getting these core fundamental things right. And there's some, I really like this way of thinking about it, which is it's the actions that we put forward must be the ones that are essential, but perhaps not necessarily completely sufficient on their own. Because if they were essential and sufficient, that's a silver bullet. But if it's essential, it means that the other stuff that we're doing won't work unless we've got that in place. And, this is some work we did with the International Society for Physical Activity and Health. And again, this was really to start to think about, how do we prioritize those actions? And this gives us 10 ways to start to think about it, drawing on experiences from UK policymakers and Australian government policymakers that we spoke to. And these are the types of things they were saying. But really the one that I'm saying now that should stand out is it should be effective at the population level. The action that we're lobbying for and asking for should work. And that's another realization over that course of those years. I've gone through 10 years, 15 years in this physical activity thing, learning more and more. And there's loads of things we could potentially do, hundreds of actions, but let's focus on those that have the most impact.
Yeah, and I've been at this for 35 years, and I can tell you that really, when I was first starting out, it was really all about personal responsibility. And so it was, and that's kind of a form of victim blaming of saying, well, hey, this is your own fault. You need to be able to do that. But at the same time, my entire, career, the first career that I had for the first 15 years was designing an environment that would support that healthy, active lifestyle. And so even though we were helping people at the individual level and then at the corporate level and then at the societal level, it didn't work unless we created an environment which supported and made it easy for them to basically choose a healthier lifestyle. So again, in my terminology, the phrasing that I'm using is I look at the world through the lens of seeing activity assets. And so when I see, things in the physical realm like that, that gym or the pathway or the protected bike lanes, these are the types of things that are like, oh, hey, this is going to encourage more people to live a healthy, active lifestyle conveniently because, hey, just down at the end of the block, there's a wonderful public pool that encourages, people to be able to get there and get some physical activity in. That's the hardware. The software is all of those other things, the awareness activities, the engagement activities, the things that you can prioritize, on a budget like this and say, hey, do we have the funding? Do we have the resources? Do we have the people that can actually engage folks and support them to try to reverse the sedentary lifestyles that we all have become accustomed to because of ... cars.
Yeah. And that individual narrative is still being pushed, right? 35 years on, that's the narrative. And we absolutely need to avoid falling into that trap. And there's some fantastic framing research out there, Frameworks Institute. We've got one here, Common Cause. There's some in New Zealand, the workshop. There's loads of good framing research out there that avoids that bootstraps narrative and starts to think about how do we tackle those, the actual things that cause us to be not active or not to walk or have to drive or have to be stuck in traffic. So yeah, I one of the things we talk about in the paper is or we touch on is that neoliberal, which is the jargony term for this, I suppose, or the academic-y term around individual narratives. But here's our paper, yeah. So it was
and that's you for number one on the list there. That's you. That's Matthew Tepi, Mclaughlin. Yes, there you go.
That's it. There was way too many Matthews when I was growing up, so I had to pick another name. There was actually like 4 in my class or something, so I had to pick another name. But yeah, Joey, Ben, and Grant, we got together. We're from different parts of the world. We've all done different types of work, really, around physical activity, and put our heads together on this paper because for a long time we've been saying we don't have enemies in physical activity. We'd actually been saying that, and we start this paper off actually at a recent with a bit of a story. We start this paper off where Joey and I were sat in a conference in the front row there, like good school kids, and we were listening away. And a question was asked from the audience: "Who are the enemies of physical activity?" And I can say it wasn't us that put that forward, but the response from the audience was this really awkward laughter. This really kind of, well, do we have enemies? Oh, I didn't know we had enemies. And it was kind of, well, that's how it felt to me. And that's what sparks this idea for this paper. And we'd actually seen examples in papers from years gone by where people had actually explicitly said physical activity doesn't have enemies. And so what is an enemy? And, okay, it's those, it's either deliberate or passive non-support of physical activity policies. So people that are either opposed or not actively supporting. And we can think of some industries that come to mind with that, when the housing industry lobbies for more land on the urban fringe, when the road industry lobbies for more funding for wider roads, more concrete, when we see organizations putting forward maybe certain types of physical activity, maybe the car industry and car manufacturers preferencing certain types of physical activity like sport, and that individual narrative of you can just do it, over and above what will actually change physical activity, which is just making it convenient for everybody. This isn't kind of this isn't complicated. I really like Tom Flood's idea around the 15-minute cities concept. Is, it's just because I'm lazy that I want everything close by. And that's absolutely right. We just want to be able to get to things that are close by. It needs to be convenient. And I suppose the one thing that our paper also, and we kind of already touched on this, John, but when you were saying there about your work in the past around creating more active communities and making sure we've got the swimming pool close by and making sure we've got the bike lanes, and I'd been thinking about that. That's all additive, but we actually have to get political and stop the bad things. For example, there are states in Australia where there is record investment in active transport, record investment in road safety, record investment in all of the things that sound great. Yeah, awesome. But actually, we're having worse outcomes than we did before. And maybe we can bring a few of those outcomes up for Perth as well. Touching back onto the longest city in the world, I think there's some fantastic imagery by a guy called Harry Cunningham on his website. He's done a documentary that I'd highly recommend to your audience to find out a little bit about Perth and how we're structured. It's the imagery shows to me shows a really bleak and non-connected, non-social, but why is it like that? It's why that because of our laws and our policy documents that say this is the way housing should be developed. These are the setback laws. These are the minimum parking requirements. These are this is the allowable height in certain areas. These are the restrictions. If you want to go 4 stories and more, you've got to install XYZ expensive fire things. And look, all of those things that I'm saying results in developments like this. And I'm sure this is not news to many in the American audience of this podcast, but this is what we get. And Perth's such a fantastic climate. We have sunshine days nearly all year round, it feels like. We have such a tremendous coastline with such natural beauty, and it's been savaged by the types of development that we're subsidizing. So we do have to get political to address this. And I should say that I'm doing this podcast through my role as a researcher, and that uncovering these subsidies and isn't hard when government reports actually put them out there and say, here's the $8 billion in subsidies for roads. And thanks for bringing up Tom's t-shirt there. Yeah, I think it's so true. We have to set up the laws to make it so that people can be lazy in their 15-minute city. Because the irony of being lazy in your 15-minute city is you're actually going to be more active than, or the population is going to be more active than if we tell people to exercise or tell people to do more, which we know just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom is just brilliant. Of course, he's been on the podcast a couple of times, and his story, of course, is he was previously shaping the narratives. He was an ad executive for the automobile industry. He did some work with the launch of Toyota there up in Canada and all that. But he's just wonderful at pulling memes together and narratives together. And so, of course, this says, 15-minute cities, no big conspiracy. Just lazy. I'm just lazy. And then up above in the arc, I just want to be close to stuff. I want stuff close by to me. It's not a conspiracy. It really isn't, at least not at that level, which was what boiled up a year or so, or maybe a couple of years ago, there in Oxford. That this is a conspiracy. 15-minute cities. They're trying to wall you into, this constrained area, and you'll break the law if you leave your little fence. Yes, there was some unfortunate framing to how it was rolled out there, but that's kind of the unfortunate thing that goes back to the narrative and the theme of the paper, is that, what? We have enemies of physical activity? I mean, really? And it's just like, what? You have enemies to a livable community? It's almost beyond belief. And that's why it's hard for us to take a step back, be empathetic with the fact that some people may not really truly understand, and buy into the misinformation that is put out or put forth. And we have to be aware of the fact, and we talk about this in Grant's interview with Dark PR, is that there are a very few people that are out there, and organizations that are out there, that have malicious intent and will shape narratives and will push forward dark PR because they've got stuff to sell. I mean, they have a vested interest to do what they do, and if they happen to be a corporation, that's to be beholden to their shareholders.
And arguably, that's why we don't blame them. That's their job. And we need to do a better job of stopping them and putting the guardrails on them.
Yes, exactly. The policy. And again, that's what the dark PR really comes down to. If we want to put those guardrails on, you're going to go high up in the chain to the root of the problem, which is the undue influence that corporations and industry has at the highest levels of political power.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff.
A nice opportunity, John, maybe to do some quick fire ones. We've done quite a bit of media work over the last few years, and we've put out a number of articles in the online newspaper, The Conversation, and perhaps we can just bring up some of those. And I think there are some useful talking points, some useful ideas for the audience to dig into, in sort of a quick fire style.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to love the international headlines. I mean, these headlines look a lot like headlines everywhere else. Australia spends $714 per person on roads every year, but just 90 cents goes to walking, wheeling, cycling. And of course, wheeling, we talk walking and biking all the time. But again, to your point, we have a tremendous number of people who are non-drivers. And there's a variety of different reasons, including, many people who are not able to drive, but they may get around with assisted devices, wheelchairs, and other types of mobility devices. So I love walking, wheeling, and cycling, and, trying to really let us know that it's not just about those guys on bikes, especially the sporty guys, And
I think this one's a twofold thing. This one's saying, well, hang on, 90 cents for, walking and cycling, that's a problem in and of itself, sure. And the organisation that I've been doing some work with, Better Streets in Australia, they have a position that it should be around $15 per person. And that's absolutely fine. But if the figure for the amount we spend on roads is so high, even if we get the active transport up to $15, it's not really going far enough. No, it isn't
Exactly.
going far enough. Let's call it
Yeah.
as it is. It
Yeah,
isn't
because
going
you're
far
still
enough because
subsidizing that way of travel. Yes.
that's it. And we know that the more roads we have, the more road capacity we have, the further that the population drives, the more road deaths we get, the more pollution we get. And that's because we're forced into it. That is the most convenient option to get around. When that's what's built, that's what people will use. And so, yeah, we talk a little in this article about other countries and what they're doing. We don't necessarily call out as perhaps as strongly as we could here. And again, this is what I'm saying about the evolution of our thinking is, calling out more strongly the funding for the roads and actually saying, have we gone far enough with cutting that? Because there's a redirecting of the road budget, which I think is a really nice frame. So we know that when we say redirecting, support from community goes up. We have a report called the What Australia Wants survey in Australia, and it surveys 3,000 Australians. That report found that the support for redirecting from road funding to walking and cycling was really high, well over 2/3, I believe. So those types of framing and subtleties that we can build on and galvanize a movement behind, galvanize people that aren't just interested in the walking, the cycling, but are interested in those better towns, better streets for whatever reason it is. If it's because they have mental health challenges and they need those quieter spaces, if it's the population problem of air pollution, if it's the population problem, one that doesn't get talked about enough but is a major health concern, is noise pollution, noisy cities from cars and road
Well,
traffic noise.
and here's a good
If we can
question
bring
for
this,
you. Yeah. In fact, we'll go to this graph that's in the story here, and we see things like this all the time. These are the financial benefits from walking and cycling, et cetera. And one of the frustrations that we have in this world of trying to create more livable places and garner support for that, is oftentimes these types of statistics just fall flat because it doesn't mean anything to them personally. When somebody's reading this out in the newspaper, and again, this is an article in a paper, or on the conversation, and somebody's taking a look at this and reading this, it doesn't really resonate to them personally of saying, oh, my life is going to be better because this financial economic benefit is to me. And so that's one of the main challenges, because it's very the benefits to being able to have the convenience and comfort of reaching for the car keys and very little friction to be able to drive everywhere for everything, that has an immediate hit of, oh, this is efficient and functional and easy to do. I'm going to keep doing this. And it's only when there's lots of friction points, like maybe there's gridlock, or maybe there's, additional taxes, or it's really expensive to park in my destinations, do we as drivers start to think, yeah, it's not that far. Gosh, that's less than 10 kilometers. It's a beautiful day. I think I'm going to take the beautiful route too. I'm going to go on the river route or whatever.
And
you see what I'm getting to.
Yeah, absolutely. Those policies have got to be stacked up. With those parking subsidies one, that's such a classic example.
Those all point to policies. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I put my academic hat back on and go, it sounds like the old academic thing to say, but there is research out there that shows what framing techniques we should use and which ones we shouldn't. And it is, again, I'm on that learning journey with colleagues here about the importance of framing. and how we do it best, because it's so important. And we hear the importance of starting with values if we're speaking in the media or we're speaking to friends that aren't necessarily sort of self-professed advocates or people like that. That is so important. Starting with, well, what do we all want? What do we all want? We all want to live in a convenient town, easy to get around, not too noisy. We've got friends close by. We're socially connected. The school that our kids go to is great and it's round the corner. We've got a hospital. We've got access to that. It doesn't cost too much. All of those things that we all want. And then start with that, because we've got everybody on the same page there. And then it's about how do we get there and starting to shape away from bootstraps and towards what actually is the thing that's stopping it. And sometimes that's about giving community control again of what is built for them. You know, the communities here in Perth, for example, do they want the types of developments that we brought up in the images before from Harry Cunningham? Do they want that? They don't. That's what they said in the thing. They don't feel connected. They're spread apart. Their friends are all over the place, and yeah. So important that we tackle those other things. One of the other ones that we've done is around speed. We've done a bit of work on speed, a couple of different articles on speed and speed limits. And I really like the global movement towards 30 kilometre an hour speed limits is fantastic. We're seeing great benefits, or in American context, 20 miles an hour, in the UK context. The Wales example that we're seeing more data coming out of recently, just so many road safety, air pollution benefits, London data. This is the types of things we need to lean into and learn from, because these are upstream policies that are making a big difference to communities, but actually not making a huge difference to impacting other industries. So there's obviously industry opposition here. Here's a line to that, I suppose, in speed limits is we actually have the technology to stop people from speeding. Full stop. And we've got a little graphic if you scroll down into this one that shows that this technology exists or will exist very soon to be able to stop people going over the speed limit. So we've framed it as, of course, you'll never get a speeding fine again.
Sure.
But
that speaks to what does this do for me? Oh, well, I don't want another speeding fine, and the built environment is such that it is it's encouraging me to drive faster and faster and faster. Yeah, I mean, here you go. Let's lean into technology a little bit. Yeah.
Well, only if we know. It could border into one of what Grant would call a magic solution.
Yes, yes,
and
exactly.
I think that's really important, is that we consider, can this be done, and is it going to be effective? If we can put maximum speed limits like we do on e-scooters in some jurisdictions, if we can actually stop people from speeding, that's going to have road safety benefits. But it's not going far enough. Again, we still got subsidies for driving. We're still going to have people driving. It's like the autonomous cars thing. So is it my top priority action a couple of years on from writing that article? Probably not. And so that's the evolution in my thinking. I suppose I'm just being honest with the audience here, in that, if you're watching this and it's difficult to watch, I think that's because you feel conflicted at points. Maybe you don't believe certain bits of it. All of what we're saying is evidenced. All of what we're saying about the misinformation, all of what we're saying about framing being so important, all of what we're saying about enemies and industries undermining, it's all evidenced. But it's uncomfortable because maybe it's new. And that's certainly how I felt to start with as I was getting into this and kind of looking at this in more detail, because it's challenging those assumptions that we hold. I don't know about you, John, but that's how I feel when new stuff comes to me. It's like, okay, I have to take a breath, think about it. What does the evidence say on this? Was I wrong? And sometimes just admitting, yeah, actually, that wouldn't be my top priority action now. And yeah.
Well, and what I love about this particular title of this article that you wrote back in May of 2024 is is that assumption too, a lot of people just don't even think about traffic fatalities and serious injuries and crashes. Here in the United States, we're talking about the size of the impact is about like an airjet, an airliner crashing every single day. About 115 people die on U.S. roadways every single day. Most people don't know that. It's just not talked about. I mean, it's suppressed in the media, maybe not suppressed outwardly, but it doesn't lead. It doesn't lead the news that, that happens. If a jet crashes, it leads the news. Same
Yes,
loss of life. Yes.
The Air India crash recently, it's rather crude, but I looked at the data that day because I was very interested in it. It was getting so much coverage, the Air India crash, rightly so. Lots of people died. It was tragic. But the same day, twice as many people died. I think it was twice. It was definitely at least twice as many people died on Indian roads.
Right. Yeah. And so the step one is people just don't have the awareness. Step two, if they do have the awareness, and maybe they've been affected personally, someone in their family, has suffered a horrific crash, serious injuries, or fatality, then they just are like, Tepi, John, don't you understand? This is the cost of living in a modern society. We got to get to the restore, and this is how we get around, and this is what we do. And because we're in the longest city, we drive many, many, many kilometers every single day. So our risk is greater because we know that the more you drive, the more likely something's going to happen. There's a volume effect there. And so I love this title because it sort of dispels the other, one of the other frames that comes up in Grant's book is that, hey, you just can't do anything about it. I mean, you just have to accept that this is what it is. There's no problem here. Look elsewhere. There's nothing here. It's like the wizard behind the curtain. No. Look elsewhere. There's nothing behind here. But yes, I love the fact that you're pointing out that, yes, many cities have achieved this. How have they achieved it? And then you dive into some of that information here.
And look, many have achieved it multiple times as well. So it's not kind of like by accident. The Helsinki example most recently. I'm going to hone in on self-critique because I think, again, it's important. Some of the, you'll see from some of the subheadings we've got here that we don't go in hard enough on the need for less road capacity.
Yeah.
That, like you said before, road capacity and vehicle kilometers traveled or vehicle miles traveled and then the flow-on effect to road safety is huge. And of course, there's two ways of doing it. You can deal with the existing infrastructure and how do we make that safer, and that's safer speed limits, potentially speed limiting cars if that technology becomes available, and making streets slower, introducing things like modal filters, which perhaps we can talk about and bring up in a second. We can do all of those things, but if we don't actually tackle the fundamental, we've actually got a road budget that makes our walking and cycling budget look like spare change. That's where we've got the problem, and it actually is stacks and stacks. $39 billion a year in Australia. We only have a population of 26 million, so it's an enormous amount of spending on roads to distant, far-flung places that subsidizes housing on urban fringes, and this circular problem of industries getting more and more funding for that, dark PR and so forth. But of course, we have got some solutions like the speed limits, safer speed limits, 30 kilometre an hour movement that can be implemented on current infrastructure. And I think one of the lowest cost ways.
Yeah, I'd love for us to we're kind of getting short on time here. I think you have some wonderful graphics and images, because the other thing that people have a hard time imagining is how could my street look different? And because, oh well, of course we're driving because this is what we have, and this is the way it's always going to be. We talked about the enormous amount of money that is budgeted for roadways in the United States. When we look at the huge budget that is set aside for roadways, it's almost always for new infrastructure and capacity increase. It's not even for maintenance, because going back to the strong towns, argument, and what Chuck talks about is that, we basically do a deal with the devil, in the sense of, oh, we get all this federal money to build up all this infrastructure, and then, oh, that's right, we have to figure out a way how to maintain it. And so in general, that big bucket of money, that $714 per person per year, is almost always prioritizing new infrastructure, not the maintenance and upkeep of the potholes and things of that nature. And that's where many communities, and probably this community there in Perth, if you're continuing to expand further and further out, then, those new roads are fantastic. They're in great condition, but guaranteed there's potholes in the oldest, the ones that are several life cycles, back, in terms of, they need to be completely replaced, and that those monies are much harder. So I wanted to point that out as we then shift gears to help people imagine how their street can be a little bit different. Because if you're imagining a street that is, going to be safe for kids, and now you're a parent, you're really honing in on this, is how can that area, how can the public realm right outside of my door be more conducive to my child? And so let's take a look and have you narrate this as we go through these.
So this is a street that I actually used to live on. And so we've done these sliding images. They're freely available should people want to use them. But this is a street in Perth on near to the airport, for people wanting to Google Perth and get a bit of a lay of the land. And it's actually a classic. I don't know the American terminology. Do you still use the term rat run?
Yeah. It's mostly mostly a UK thing, but cut through traffic, rat running. Yes, yeah.
Cut through, rat run. Yeah. That's my background from the UK coming through. So this is a classic rat run through to the airport. People will pull off the highway and sneak through the back roads. And we used to live on this road. And so that's why I chose this one as an example. You can see it's quite a wide road, 3.5 meter lane widths, which is huge. Footpath on one side, which is very narrow, very bleak, not a lot of trees. And so what does it look like if we remove a bit of the concrete, add grass back in? Perth is a very hot climate, but it doesn't mean that we don't have water sources to create places like this. It is doable. We have got streets that look like this in our older suburbs. And this is a modal filter. I don't know. Here's another example, a modal filter, slightly, obviously, a lot less to it. And it just cuts off that rat running traffic, which people have heard about these before, but they're cheap, is what I'm getting at. They're low cost. They're the things that help create the sort of livable neighborhoods. Everybody can get to their house by car, but it might be a little bit less convenient than if you're on a bike or walking.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're proposing here is, and we have a slightly, I think, more beautiful version of this one. Yeah, there's a slightly more beautiful version. Because it could be the first version of it is, lighter, quicker, cheaper. We're just going to get this down. Boom. We can get it down earlier. We can just demonstrate and show the effectiveness, get the support of the community, and then you can always come in and make it a little bit more beautiful and a little bit more substantial.
Sure. And we've got these in Western Australia. These have existed from early developments in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We built less of them in the 2000s, and now we're starting to go, okay, how do we retrofit these into major
Exactly.
rat running streets? But it goes beyond the major rat running streets. We did an article on the super blocks of Barcelona, and obviously there's the density of those super blocks that really supports the walkable environments. But those those super blocks had similar designs with preventing through traffic and right turn only or left turn only, and we applied that to the. It's basically going beyond one modal filter towards multiple, and yeah, we've got this. This is outside a school in Melbourne, and yeah, it this is a really difficult place for kids to be picked up because there's all of that car parking. Uh, we were learning from the school streets of Paris here. One argument, looking at it now, is that the lane widths are still extremely wide. Could we have narrowed those further to prevent fast traffic? Yeah, sure, we could have done. Do we even need through traffic outside of this school? That will depend on the context, but probably not. Not it's probably not required. So yeah, I think really looking at, okay, everybody can get to their house by car if they need to, but how do we make it a little bit more sticky? And that's what Helsinki story that was, reading about, and some of the research that they've been doing about why they had zero road deaths. They made driving the less convenient option at the same time as making the walking and cycling the more convenient option, and that's just the political reality. I think embracing apoliticalness and saying, "Oh no, we can just do it by doing more bike lanes and more good stuff and trees," really ignores the reality that we actually do need less of the bad stuff. At the same time, that will fund more of the good stuff.
Right.
So here's
Yeah.
an example from Fremantle. We've just put what it would look like to put a pocket in. Generally speaking, you're right, John. The images bring the story to life for people, and we could show these to decision makers and say, hey, this is what it would look like. They're relatively low cost to make.
And it doesn't seem like it's too radical.
No,
This example
I mean,
right
this one's
here
a bit,
is like, yeah, this is like, hey, this is our first step. This is sort of like a tactical urbanism sort of approach here. This isn't too radical. Let's do this as our first step. See what that's like. Boom, boom, boom.
But
boom.
I think the argument
Yeah.
would be that I think sometimes that's a weakness.
Sure.
As well.
Sure.
Because
because if it's just like that modal filter. Here's the quick and easy version of it. And what's nice about using those materials is they're lighter, quicker, cheaper. You can sort of adjust them, etc. But you can always come in and say, once the behavior has started to change and the support of the community is like, yes, love this. Now let's make it more beautiful, because really those flex posts are kind of ugly. So you end up planting those trees there. Same here. You start off with something lighter, quicker, cheaper, maybe for a season or two, and like, yeah, no, we love this. Okay, let's go to the next version of this. Boom.
Yeah. And I think that the same applies for, this is at one street, and say we did the second version with the red concrete. If we did that in this one place, that then helps justify it in another local suburb. And so there is an argument to that, but it is that incrementalism approach. And I think being bold from the start, and actually I think looking at the two images, the one where there's the more simple design, and this one here, it's obviously the same street, it actually does highlight that to do things properly is going to make a much bigger difference. And of course, we can start with the tactical urbanism stuff, but let's be bold in what we ask for. And this is something that Grant and I have talked about a lot. There is this argument that incrementalism will just get stuck at step one. I've seen these parklets removed from other areas. And I think this one's in Wollongong in New South Wales. It's used as a bit of a thoroughfare through the town centre, but I believe that there is an opportunity to route majority of traffic around the outside and to create a lovely, pleasant shopping street. So we're bringing up some shopping street examples here. We had the housing street example before. This is a shopping street. I believe we've added density into this one because we really wanted to underscore that, this is an inner city suburb of Perth. It is zoned for higher density, but because of the subsidies for urban fringe development, developers don't want to touch it because it doesn't stack up as much as the urban fringe developments. So this is Leaderville. What a lovely town centre it currently is, but wow, we could make it so much better by giving that
something
space back to people.
Yeah, something you said earlier really comes to life with both of these most recent examples here. Is you also see, the planting of more trees and bringing more green elements in, and really bringing that heat island effect down, because as you mentioned, it's a hot environment. It's a warm environment there. And so heat stress is a huge, huge factor in being able to counter that with, decreasing the amount of, pavement, period.
I don't know whether you've had Lucy Saunders on the podcast from the UK.
Not yet.
Lucy on?
Yeah. No.
There we go. There's potential next guest. Lucy is leads the Healthy Streets organization. They do some fantastic work. I think it just really made me think when you were saying about the shade element. Lucy talks a lot about streets that are not too noisy, that people feel safe to cross, that have shade, that are pleasant, and provide some tools that both community can use, but also engineers and decision makers. And all of these tools are used to help us to get that change that we need. Yeah.
So when you're looking at these examples here, and getting back to your desire to get things done, how do people respond when they see these things? When we're like, "Oh, Tepi, now I see what you mean."
It has been like that in presentations for sure. People are like, yeah, okay, right, I see what you're saying. I've shown them to friends who are like, what do you do for work? You're the bike lane guy, right? Like, is that all you want? I'm like, no, I'm not the bike lane guy. In fact, this is not really about bike lanes at all. This is about streets that you and I would love to go and have a coffee on, that you and I would love to cross, that would love to live on. Think about the suburbs or the holiday destinations that we go to. They're always walkable. They're always green. The places that we enjoy spending time in generally have less concrete and less cars. And we have to call that out. And positive message framing would say, I should say, more green space and more people walking and cycling. I disagree to some extent when we're talking about this. We have to call out what we need to stop. When we're talking to other people, we have to call out, look at this amount of concrete here creating all this hot space. Then lead into, we create the green space.
Yeah.
So it's a subtle change.
It is a subtle change, but here's the challenge now. Because going back to the controversy that we talked about earlier with the 15-minute city, is that when we use that sort of language and it's sort of boldly in your face, it also, makes people who are caught in that system, who live in car dependency and don't really have a choice, it makes them feel like they are being attacked. And then they're really susceptible for buying into the conspiracy theories and believing that this is a war on cars and by proxy, a war on me. You want to take my car away from me. You want it because you just said it, Tepi. You want to have less concrete and you want to have less, opportunity and fewer opportunities for parking. You're the enemy now, Tepi.
And I think that's why the framing stuff's really good. We start with those values. We say, what do we all want? And then we move into a really, really tight and clear single sentence that says what needs to change. And I think if we're talking about this, for example, we pick a certain policy that needs to change. In Australian context, we have density laws that mean that communities are hampered and can't build what they want to build. They don't have control. And so this is a sort of give community control of places that they want to build. Communities want this. They're telling us they want this. Make the laws, make the policies that support that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you framed it in that way. Is that you phrased it in that way, and it's about the framing, and it's about really delivering the message in such a way that, yes, we're calling things out. We're saying that this is what we need. We need fewer drivers. We need fewer cars, choking our roads. We need less infrastructure focusing in on that. But it doesn't need to be something that is threatening to people, because if we also frame it in such a way that even drivers want fewer drivers in front of them. So for those people who really must drive, they would love to have fewer drivers in front of them as well. So there is that benefit. So being able to do that and deliver that message in such a way that really kind of like hones in on the master that we talked about earlier in Tom Flood, of bicycles deliver the freedom that, the auto advertisement, promises. That's kind of what we have to do, is we have to be able to tell the message in such a way that is not threatening to individuals, but really helps tell the story of, hey, this is a major problem that we have to have. And the only way that we can get to this is we have to make some big changes.
Yeah. And I think that's the bit that perhaps I didn't do before, and that you pointed out really important. When we do the values piece and we say we all want to live in towns that look like this, that are walkable, that are social connected, that's the first piece. The second piece is we need to change this law that means that communities don't get the communities that they want. This law is restricting communities from what they want. This will lead to less concrete and more trees, and that's what communities want. Circle back round to the values, and what a storytelling approach that is. It really does help. It's tough. Hey, I'm still like everybody that's in this world. We're all still practicing, learning. I do a lot of like radio interviews, media stuff, and I'm continually like trying to refine that skill set, because it's so important. The framing builds community support.
Right.
And it combats the bootstrap narrative.
We have that same background. And so, the background is, the sciences. This is what we've studied. We understand what needs to happen from a disease prevention perspective and from an exercise physiology perspective. Again, listing out those benefits and those graphs doesn't do anything to motivate people, but being able to tell that narrative and that story, just like that story arc that you said, in bringing it back and saying, I joke about it, and say, that I'm a health promotion professional with 35 years of experience turned YouTuber, because I saw the need about a decade ago of being able to shape the narrative and tell storytelling and have wonderful conversations with the folks who are out there doing things in the world and researching it. And you're doing both. Tepi, Mclaughlin, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast. This has been such a joy and pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us on, John. Cheers.
Hey, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Tepi. And if you did, please, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, I'd be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on the subscription button down below and ring that notifications bell. And if you're enjoying this content here on Active Towns, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Hey, it's super easy to do. You can just click on the join button right here on YouTube. You can also leave a YouTube super thanks for this particular video, as well as navigating over to activetowns.org. Click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons do get early and ad-free access to all this video content, and you can also make a contribution to the nonprofit. Hey, every little bit adds up and is very much appreciated. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And again, just want to send a huge thank you to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel financially via YouTube memberships, YouTube super thanks, as well as making contributions to the nonprofit and joining my Patreon. Every little bit adds up and is very much appreciated. Thank you all so much.